The morning bustle filled the offices of Hawthorne and Beck, one of the most prestigious corporations in Dallas. Executives hurried through the hallways, voices echoed off the walls, and the rhythmic sound of fingers striking keyboards set the pace of the day. But amidst the chaos of tailored suits and high-level meetings, there was one presence that went completely unnoticed. Evelyn, the cleaning woman. Dressed in her dark green uniform, she pushed her cleaning cart with the same routine as always, moving like a shadow among them. No one looked at her. No one greeted her. No one spoke to her, except when they needed a spilled coffee wiped up or a trash bin emptied. To all of them, Evelyn didn't exist. But what no one knew was that the woman who picked up the remains of their lunches and cleaned the meeting rooms after million-dollar deals were closed was the most powerful person in that office. Evelyn didn't just know every corner of the company, every conversation they thought was private, every injustice committed in those hallways. She held absolute control over the company in the most unexpected way. And although she had remained silent for years, she knew the time to change everything was getting closer. The atmosphere inside Hawthorne and Beck was far from reflecting the brilliance and sophistication that its towering glass building projected in the heart of Dallas. Behind those immaculate walls hid a ruthless work culture, where cutthroat competition, contempt for employees, and the arrogance of the corporate elite defined everyday life. Evelyn, with years of experience as a silent observer, had witnessed countless moments that revealed how little humanity was valued within those offices. Promotions weren't given to the most talented, but to those who best knew how to play the game of manipulation. Mistakes were never the responsibility of the executives. They always fell on those too weak to defend themselves. And when someone dared to speak out against an injustice, their name vanished from the system as if they had never worked there. But if there was one person who embodied everything wrong with the company, it was Alan Greaves, the CEO. A man whose mere presence instilled fear in every meeting, whose deep and commanding voice could destroy careers in an instant. He didn't lead the company with vision, but with intimidation. His philosophy was simple. Success justified any means, no matter how many people he crushed along the way. Evelyn remembered perfectly the times she had overheard him mock senior employees. "She's still here?" he once said about one of the longest-serving secretaries. "I don't understand why we haven't retired her yet. It's not like she contributes anything." Those words, spoken with absolute indifference, weren't exceptions. They were the norm. That was how leadership worked at Hawthorne and Beck. Evelyn had listened to hallway conversations where executives cynically discussed cutting wages at the lower levels while celebrating record-breaking profits with lavish dinners. She had seen employees cry silently in the bathrooms after being humiliated in meetings, reduced to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. The cleaning staff, especially, were treated as if they were invisible. Their salaries barely increased, their hours were extended without notice, and any mistake, no matter how small, became a reason for dismissal. But the worst part wasn't the workload. It was the way they were ignored, as if their lives, their struggles, and their efforts had no significance. One day, Evelyn witnessed a moment that would stay with her forever. A young intern, nervous and with trembling hands, accidentally spilled his coffee on the floor near Alan Greaves' office. Within seconds, the CEO's fury descended upon him. "Are you completely incompetent?" Alan growled, crossing his arms as he stared at the mess with disgust. "God, how do they hire people like you?" The intern barely managed to stammer an apology before Alan's eyes shifted to Evelyn, who was passing by with her cleaning cart at that moment. "Clean it up," he ordered, without even looking at her, as if she were part of the furniture. It wasn't the tone of his voice that enraged her. It wasn't the humiliation in the intern's eyes. It was the absolute certainty that Alan would never stop. It didn't matter how many people suffered, how many careers he destroyed, or how many lives he trampled under his rule. As long as no one stopped him, he would continue accumulating power, convinced of his own untouchability. And that day, as she left the floor spotless, Evelyn made a decision. She could no longer remain a bystander. She could no longer allow impunity to reign in a place where so many suffered in silence. It was time to act. Evelyn had endured years of contempt, of gazes passing through her as if she were invisible, of derogatory comments slipping between arrogant executives without a second thought about who might be listening. But nothing had prepared her for what happened that afternoon. The moment that changed everything. She was finishing her shift when she heard the unmistakable voice of Alan Greaves resonating from his office. It wasn't unusual for the CEO to stay late, devising new strategies to maximize profits at the expense of his employees. But this time, the conversation had a different tone. "The restructuring is imminent," he said with his characteristic coldness. "There are too many support staff, too many unnecessary costs. We will cut whatever does not add value." Evelyn didn't need any more details to understand what he meant. The staff reduction wouldn't only affect administrative employees, but also the cleaning and maintenance teams. People who barely earned enough to survive, but to Alan and his circle of executives, they were nothing more than numbers on a balance sheet. What she heard next sealed her decision. "And for God's sake, it's time to renew the cleaning staff. I don't understand why we're still keeping some of them around," he chuckled. "We wouldn't even notice if they disappeared tomorrow." Evelyn felt anger rising through her chest. He wasn't just talking about her, but about all those who had served the company for years without receiving even the smallest token of respect. Alan Greaves didn't see people. He saw resources to be discarded at his convenience. Enough was enough. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat at the table in her small kitchen, the same place where she had spent countless nights studying the corporate world, and spread out all the evidence she had gathered. Every document, every financial irregularity, every unjustified dismissal. Everything she needed to expose Alan Greaves was right in front of her. But revealing it wasn't enough. She had to do it the right way, at the right moment, in front of the people who truly had the power to make a change. That was when she made her decision. The next shareholders' meeting would not be just another gathering. It would be the day she brought down Alan Greaves. She knew that confronting him meant risking everything, that the possibility of being discredited or ignored was high. But Evelyn had waited for the exact moment to act. And now, with solid evidence and the certainty that she held the power, there was no turning back. The time had come to reveal who the woman everyone believed to be invisible truly was. The day of the shareholders' meeting arrived with the same apparent normalcy as any other at Hawthorne and Beck. The polished floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and freshly brewed coffee. Executives strolled through the hallways with an air of untouchable authority, their conversations filled with numbers, projections, and veiled power plays. Alan Greaves, in particular, radiated confidence. His presence commanded attention as he walked into the conference room, his sharp suit tailored to perfection, his smile calculated and smug. To him, this meeting was nothing more than a formality, a routine gathering where he would reassure shareholders of the company's success, silence any lingering concerns, and leave with his position of power even more secure. But Alan had no idea that today would be anything but routine. As the shareholders settled into their leather-bound chairs, murmuring about quarterly earnings and upcoming mergers, Evelyn entered the room in her usual quiet manner. She moved with purpose, her uniform crisp, her face unreadable. No one looked at her, no one acknowledged her, because to them, she didn't exist. Alan took his place at the head of the table, fingers tapping against the polished wood as he began his speech. His voice was smooth, his tone authoritative. He spoke of aggressive expansion, cost-cutting strategies, and the promising future that lay ahead. When he touched upon the upcoming restructuring and budget adjustments, some shareholders nodded in agreement, while others remained indifferent. The numbers looked good, after all. That was when Evelyn took her first step. She set her card aside, cleared her throat, and spoke. "Excuse me." The words sliced through the room like a razor. The murmurs stopped. A dozen pairs of eyes, some annoyed, some confused, turned toward her. Alan's expression darkened instantly, irritation flashing across his face. "Ma'am, we are in a private meeting," he said, his voice edged with condescension. "You can clean later." Evelyn didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply reached into her cart, pulled out a folder, and set it down in front of him. "I am here as the majority shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck. she said, her voice steady and unwavering. A stunned silence fell over the room. Alan blinked, his composure cracking. Some shareholders exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they had misheard her. Others leaned forward, their interest piqued by the quiet authority in her tone. Alan scoffed, a dismissive smirk curling on his lips. "That's ridiculous," he said, shaking his head. "A cleaning lady, the majority shareholder? This is some kind of joke." Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't need to. With calm precision, she opened the folder and slid a set of documents toward the center of the table. "Here is the proof," she said. "After my husband's passing, I inherited the majority of his shares in the company. I have kept a low profile, but I have been observing, analyzing, and recording everything that happens here. And what I've uncovered should concern every single person in this room." A ripple of unease spread through the board members as they skimmed through the documents. Lines of text jumped out at them: financial inconsistencies, hidden expenses, unethical layoffs, questionable bonuses. The numbers told a damning story. Alan's face darkened as he flipped through the pages. "This is absurd," he growled, but his voice no longer carried its usual weight. Evelyn met his glare without hesitation. "No, Alan," she said. "What's absurd is that for years you have drained this company dry, lining your own pockets while treating the employees who keep it running like disposable assets. What's absurd is that you assumed no one was paying attention." The room buzzed with hushed conversations. Several shareholders turned to one another, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm. The weight of the accusations was undeniable. The numbers were real. The evidence was irrefutable. "I have made the decision to remove you from your position," Evelyn continued, her voice firm. "And in case anyone here doubts my authority, I have enough shares to make this decision final." Alan's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in his career, he was speechless. He looked around the room, searching for support, for a lifeline, but found none. Even the board members who had once admired his ruthlessness now saw him for what he was, a liability. The vote happened swiftly. No arguments, no debate. One by one, the board members raised their hands, their decision clear. The verdict was unanimous. Alan Greaves was removed from his position as CEO. The room, once filled with his unwavering control, now buzzed with uncertainty and quiet awe. Evelyn exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The fight was over. She turned to Alan, who sat frozen in his chair, his entire empire crumbling around him. For years he had dismissed her, looked past her, treated her like she was nothing. But now, in the very space where he had once ruled without question, Evelyn was the most powerful person in the room. The news of Alan Greaves' dismissal spread through Hawthorne and Beck like an uncontrollable wildfire. The whispers turned into murmurs, then into open conversations in break rooms and hallways. For years, Alan had been an unshakable force, ruling through fear and intimidation. His word had been law, his presence enough to make employees straighten in their chairs and choose their words carefully. Now, he was gone. And not because of another power-hungry executive or a strategic corporate maneuver. He had been taken down by someone they had all overlooked. Evelyn was no longer the invisible woman who moved silently through the building, pushing her cleaning cart, listening to conversations as if she weren't there. Now her name echoed in every office, her actions analyzed, dissected, and whispered about with equal parts awe and disbelief. Some employees struggled to comprehend how she had done it. Others, particularly those who had suffered under Alan's reign, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. But while the rumors swirled and her story made its way beyond the walls of Hawthorne and Beck, reaching even financial news outlets, Evelyn had no interest in recognition. She was not here for praise. She had not exposed Alan Greaves just to see him fall. She was here for something far more important. She was here to rebuild. The very next morning, Evelyn walked into the office, not with her usual cleaning supplies, but with a stack of documents and a mission. For the first time, she was no longer navigating the hallways like a ghost. Employees turned to look at her, some with admiration, others with curiosity. The executives who had once dismissed her presence now kept their eyes on her, waiting to see what she would do next. And she did not keep them waiting long. Her first stop was the Human Resources Department, the place where complaints had been buried, where careers had been unjustly ended, where voices had gone unheard. She requested files every termination over the past 5 years, every grievance report that had been ignored, every case where an employee had been forced out without cause. What she found confirmed everything she already knew. Alan's reign had not just been ruthless, it had been corrupt. Talent had been discarded in favor of loyalty to him. Hardworking employees had been sacrificed to protect the bonuses of those at the top. Not anymore. She had those cases reopened. Former employees were contacted, their situations reassessed. Some would be reinstated, others would receive compensation for what they had lost. Evelyn didn't just want to correct the mistakes of the past. She wanted to make sure they would never be repeated. Then came the executives. She gathered them in the largest conference room, the same space where Alan had once dictated their futures with a smirk and an iron fist. But today, it was Evelyn who stood at the front of the room. "This company will change," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "The era of manipulation, abuse of power, and impunity is over. From now on, every person in this building will be treated with the respect they deserve." The silence that followed was different from the usual quiet compliance these executives were used to. This was something else, something heavier. Some of them shifted in their seats, others avoided her gaze. Because for the first time, they were facing a leader they could not intimidate, a woman who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. One executive cleared his throat. "And what if we disagree with this? New direction?" Evelyn met his gaze head-on. "Then you are free to leave," she said simply. "Hawthorne and Beck will no longer be a place where power is maintained through fear. Either you stand for integrity or you stand aside." No one spoke after that, because the truth was clear. Evelyn had already won. The changes came swiftly. A financial transparency program was put in place, ensuring that no executive could enrich themselves at the expense of the employees. Salary adjustments were made, particularly for maintenance staff and other undervalued workers. Roles that had been dismissed as replaceable were finally given the compensation they deserved. But the most important change wasn't just in policies or numbers. It was in the atmosphere. For the first time in years, people walked through the halls without the weight of fear pressing down on them. Conversations were open, no longer hushed or cautious. Employees spoke up in meetings without fear of retaliation. A confidential reporting system was established, ensuring that any future abuses would not be silenced. And at the heart of it all, Evelyn remained the same. She did not take the largest office. She did not demand recognition or applause. She simply worked side by side with those who had once been ignored. She listened, she learned, and she led. Because the true lesson she had imparted to the company was not just that Alan Greaves had fallen. It was that power does not always reside where it seems. Sometimes the ones you ignore, the ones you dismiss, the ones who blend into the background, are the ones paying the most attention. And when they decide to act, they can change everything. Evelyn never sought to be seen, but in the end, everyone saw her. The woman who once went unnoticed in the hallways, ignored by arrogant executives, ended up being the key to transforming an entire company. Her story left an indelible lesson. No one is truly invisible. For years, power had been in the hands of those who thought themselves untouchable. But Evelyn proved that true strength does not always come from authority. Observation, patience, and determination can be just as powerful. Everyone in that building learned that respect should not be based on job titles, but on the dignity every person deserves. Evelyn's legacy was not just Alan Greaves's downfall, but the awakening of an entire company. Employees began to speak up, demand what was rightfully theirs, and recognize their own worth. They would no longer accept being ignored. In the end, those who seemed invisible were the ones who made the biggest difference. If this story inspired you, comment with the number 1. If you think we can improve, comment with the number 2. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that justice and courage can change everything. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story full of emotion and powerful lessons.